Hey everybody, Roy Rogers from the Second Sons and the White Book here, back with another one of those How and the Why of It videos. This one is probably one of the more requested videos, and also the one I've been threatening / promising to do for a while, which is of course to talk about Greyjoy, Squid Cards, Haas Botley, all of those memes, Greyjoy. So we are going to be talking in particular about what I think is the most viable of the current Greyjoy builds, which is Greyjoy Wars to Come, which should not come as a surprise to people following the metagame, because right now we are in a metagame dominated by Wars to Come decks across all factions, but particularly the most competitive factions of Targaryen, Tyrell, and Martell. Tyrell Wars is tearing up the regional season 1 Euros. Martell Wars is winning regionals, tearing up the regional season. Targaryen Wars is posting solid results, good finishes, and Greyjoy is no exception to that sort of metagame force. Donovan's agenda is, and that utility of running 10 plots is really hard for any faction trying to stay competitive in this metagame. It's really hard for those decks to pass up. The sort of good stuff decks are the dominant force, and again, Greyjoy is no exception. So what puts Greyjoy apart from these from its competitors? What makes Greyjoy different in this metagame? So what's interesting overall is actually, particularly since we had a combo winter where where mid-range decks were largely being pushed out. So, all right. So what are mid-range decks? So mid-range decks are decks that consistently try to, now you can listen to a White Book episode about this, and I'll put it in the show notes below. But mid-range decks are decks that are focused very much on playing very efficiently statted, particularly for their cost to strength or their cost to icon spread. But if Greyjoy has the great benefit of having some of the characters that have the best of all three. They're undercosted, they're overstrength, and they have way too many icons for what they do. So Greyjoy is like the king of that particular strategy of mid-range, and it's been since the core set with Euron, who we'll get to in a little bit. And so they play efficiently statted and costed characters, and they're focused very much on the challenges phase. Winning challenges, controlling the board, maintaining a board presence, limiting your opponent's ability to win challenges, and limiting your opponent's board presence. Or the most simple way to put mid-range decks is it's good old honest thrones. And we actually live in a meta that in many ways is much more mid-range, is much more good old-fashioned thrones than the last couple of metas that we've had. Like we came over a combo winter where combo was dominant and it was the dominant force. But here we have factions that are much more challenge based focused. And Greyjoy is the most mid-rangey of this mid-range-ish meta. Unlike Tyrell, Greyjoy does not have a passive power plan that or even an ambush plan that it can deploy alongside its mid-range strategies. Unlike Martell, it doesn't have that sort of combo-y Doran's game style quick power grab. Boom. It also doesn't have Targaryen's burn them to death strategy, Dracarys strategy. It in many ways, Greyjoy is literally the closest definition to a mid-range deck that you get in Thrones. And that's one of its great strengths, and it's also one of its great weaknesses. Now, it does have its own little twist in this, which is location control, and we'll get to that as well. It's one of the reasons why Greyjoy remains a force in the meta, and remains somewhat like the Landing Crossing deck that we talked about. Because of that location, I said that in my last video about Landing Crossing, I said it was a policeman meta, or policeman force in the meta, because it helps suppress degenerate decks that are incredibly slow and need to win and accumulate particularly location-based combos or combinations over the course of several turns. Like the most obvious example would be like Martell Stag, or the Wall. Or wall decks where you could set this inevitable win condition that slowly grinds your opponent out. Landing Crossing punishes those strategies by going fast before you can do shit. Now, Greyjoy is similar in that sense. Now Greyjoy can go fast. It's one of its strengths. It has a lot of renown body, similar to Tyrell in that case. It has the option to go fast, but speed isn't necessarily where Greyjoy builds are right now. in the past they have. Worlds this past year, I played a very fast combo killer Greyjoy deck. Greyjoy can go very fast, and Matt Gelman, my teammate, did really well with it. I did not do as well. But but that's not where Greyjoy is. Fast Greyjoy is not where we are right now. We're more in that mid-range, challenge-based. Greyjoy actually is, through location control, is how it acts as a policeman to the meta. It really goes after location-based strategies, particularly out of Martell, particularly out of Targaryen, and sometimes out of Tyrell. It has the ability to steal your opponent's locations, which remains a unique theme to Greyjoy, particularly in the card of Euron Crow's Eye, which we will get to when we start talking about Greyjoy. But location control is one of the ways in which Greyjoy acts as a policeman. It says, like, look, if your opponent is relying on these key locations, things like Hightower, things like Dorne, Greyjoy is an option in your toolbox as someone trying to answer that presence in the meta by saying, like, look, I will punish you for doing that. It was one of the reasons why Greyjoy's perennial presence, particularly at the Gen Con meta, is one of the reasons why we didn't bring, my build group and I didn't bring a Night's Watch or Martell Stag deck, very location, very based deck to Gen Con last year, despite the fact that we had built a couple, was because we were afraid of Greyjoy. We were afraid, like, look, there's going to be a lot of Greyjoy. We don't want Euron stealing our stuff. We don't want newly made lords blowing up our locations and screwing up our entire strategy. So Greyjoy remains a important policeman force for its ability to declare war on your opponent's locations. And not in a general blanketed way, like decks that rely on political disaster, but it's very targeted, and that is really, really strong. And it is just going to get stronger as it's clear that FFG is printing better and better locations over time. Greyjoy's importance in the meta as a meta force to is important, that policeman role that it plays. The other combined with that location control theme is it has a very no fun theme, similar to Stark, another faction that I'll get to in the future. You know, it's very much about stopping you from doing the things that you want to do, stopping you from having fun through cards like Newly Made Lord that blows up your locations, Euron steals your locations, Triss Botley, all characters we're going to go to a little bit more detail about. And its plot lineup can also be very no fun. So that's sort of where Greyjoy is in the meta and why you would bring it. So why would, or why you should also worry about it. So if your strategy in particular is dependent on locations, you need to come up with strategies to defeat Greyjoy. And we're going to talk about that as well. So the rest of the video is going to be, I'm going to lay out sort of how Greyjoy Wars works and the key strategies of Greyjoy. Then we're going to talk about some specific answers that answer plots and a faction-specific card that really just owns Greyjoy. And then I'm going to recommend a deck that I think can consistently beat Greyjoy. So let's get right to it. So I actually had trouble finding a single Greyjoy deck that I feel like highlighted all the themes that I wanted to hit on. So I'm actually going to talk quickly about two. This first one comes from, came in third place at the First Player Championship. It was done by, I have the Jousting Pavilion open to click, by Robert Mixer. Robert Mixer. So this is Robert's deck. I think it does a pretty good job of showing some of the things that Greyjoy can do, but I'm going to also look at a second deck that was the winner of Harrenhal, created by Brandon Zimmer. The problem with using Brandon's deck as the main deck that I'm going to talk about is his deck was a Rookery deck, so it doesn't have all the cards necessarily that you would put in a Greyjoy deck because it can swap cards in and out, sideboard style. So I need to talk about both of these decks to sort of highlight kind of all the things that Greyjoy can do and all the things you may encounter in a Greyjoy deck. I'm going to focus largely here on this First Player Championship deck, supplementing it with some things that Brandon put in his deck because, again, it's hard to draw Joust insights entirely from Zimmer's deck. But they both are excellent examples of the kind of things that Greyjoy could do, and I'm going to use both of them to sort of illustrate that. So let's start with the core of why the hell you would play Greyjoy right now, and that is for this gentleman right here, Euron Crow's Eye. All right, so I'm going to read him simply because every Game of Thrones player knows what he does, but let's just establish baseline of knowledge here. He is a unique, loyal Greyjoy character. Cost 7, 6 strength. Ooh. Military, intrigue, power. He's an Ironborn, a lord, and a raider, and he has pillage. So that means when he wins a challenge, you can discard the top card of your opponent's deck. And renown, claims power when he wins challenges. Reaction, after Euron Crow's Eye discards a card using pillage, put a location from the losing opponent's discard pile into play under your control. All right, this is the most broken thing Greyjoy does. It is the most important thing Greyjoy does. Euron can literally run away with games. In many ways, the point of playing Greyjoy in the current meta is to abuse Euron, to run away with games. Like, he is an instant win if you hit your opponent's wall, you hit your opponent's Dorne, you hit your opponent's Hightower. Since, under the way the rules work, if you have a card of your opponent's in play, your opponent can't play a copy of that card. So it turns your opponent's dupes into possible threats to be stolen by Euron. It accelerates your location control, which we'll talk more about the location control package in a little bit. And Euron is just this fantastic card that really just runs away with games. And that's just his reaction ability. He also has renown, 6 strength, and 3 icons. All right, so he's super powerful and super busted. He's easily one of the strongest cards in the history of the game and remains the most dominant reason to play Greyjoy. So you're playing Greyjoy to abuse Euron's Crow's Eye and get that ability to steal your opponent's locations. But he is just the heart of a whole location control package that Greyjoy has access to. So another major location control package that they have is Lord's Port Shipwright, which allows you to kneel 3 cost, 2 cost or lower, or if you're first player, 3 cost or lower, and you're often first player when you're playing Greyjoy. Super powerful. You have Stony Shore Raider, which is a bestow card that allows you to discard bestowed gold to choose and kneel a location with printed cost 3 or lower. You have the second most powerful location control, the best location kill spell in the game, We Do Not Sow, which is after you win an unopposed challenge, choose an attachment or location control by losing opponent and discard it from play. So these, of course, all synergize with Euron. They all fuel him. But they're also just generally good ways to screw up what your opponent is doing in general with locations. And then, of course, Zimmer's Harrenhal deck has another major Greyjoy location control card, which is Newly Made Lord, which is point-and-click location removal for locations printed cost 3 or lower. These are, and so that basically gets the whole Greyjoy location control package. These taken all together are just absolutely bonkers. It's the most concentrated location control. And like you can go like Brandon Zimmer does and double down and run neutral location control in the form of Jade C. Drummond, which is, again, all synergizes with your Euron Crow's Eye. And again, so Euron is the payoff for this location control, the sort of icing on the cake, the sort of additional synergy that you get. But the location control in and of itself is just damn good. So that's the predominant thing Greyjoy is going to do to you, and the primary thing Greyjoy wants to do, which is kill locations and steal them with Euron, using your own opponent's characters to beat them up. You also have the benefit of Triss Botley. He is this new guy that came in the last cycle. His image, Triss's image, is after longtime FFG employee Evan, friend of a variety of podcasts, former marketing promoter for the game. Triss, has pillage, and he has this action. Choose a card in your opponent's discard pile and remove it from the game. Until Triss Botley leaves play, that player cannot marshal or play any copy of that card. Limit once per round. So Triss synergizes with your pillage in the form of Euron, your targeted location removal in the form of Newly Made Lord. But Newly Made Lord and of course We Do Not Sow, Newly Made Lord and We Do Not Sow whack their locations, which you then remove with Triss, so they can't play the Wall. They can't play the Dorne. They can't play Hightower. But he can also just hit any card. He can hit Dracarys's. He can hit Dany. He can hit characters. This is the beginning of, or important part of, the no fun theme that that Greyjoy has. Triss is a ridiculously good card, and he's a particularly good card in metas, again, that call for that no fun, that call for you to control what your opponent can do. So Triss is the kind of card you kind of want to. He's just fantastic in our current meta because his ability to hit Mace and his ability to hit Daenerys and all these cards that give you a problem. So if you hate a specific card, Greyjoy is a great faction to play because Triss gives you the kind of ability to control and prevent those cards from hitting you in the face. Now, it's really important to understand what Greyjoy does to your discard pile. So and the way in which that interacts with the way in which Flea Bottom has distorted the game. So Flea Bottom basically allows you to treat, particularly for low-cost characters, your discard pile as a second hand. As a second hand. But Greyjoy punishes you for that strategy. It particularly punishes you if you're running Tyrell, and this is a big thing you run into Tyrell, which runs dupes of a lot of things, but its characters and its locations, and you're often chucking this. So you draw a ton of cards, and the first thing that goes is dupes. So that leaves you more vulnerable to location control, and it leaves you more vulnerable to Greyjoy stealing your stuff in the form of Euron, or removing it from the form of Triss. And it also punishes you for just having dupes to protect your locations, because again, high tower, you got a dupe in your high tower, we do not sew it off. They can steal it with Euron, or they can remove it from Triss Botley and then blow it up with another we do not sew, or blow it up with a Jade Sea Drummond, or steal it again with Euron. So there's a variety of just ways in which Greyjoy punishes you for using your discard pile as that second hand, and it's one of the reasons why Triss was such a strong card against combo, because he can remove key combo pieces from your opponent. Oftentimes, if you're playing against combo deck, you hard mulligan for Triss, you're running 3x Triss, and you hard mulligan for him, so you can, on that first turn, hit one key combo piece, and when they go into their win on the second turn, hit the second key combo piece, and they're locked out. Now, you would think that Triss wouldn't be that good, because he's a character. You know, he's immune to first snow at 4 cost, but he's only a 3 strength power icon. That's not that great. But another major Greyjoy theme is, of course, saves. This is the ability, of course, to save your characters, save them from being killed, and Greyjoy has a lot of saves. So it has a lot of saves naturally in the form of Greyjoy, based on the fact that it has some of the best high-cost characters in the game, runs 3 of most anything. So this deck, for example, the First Player Championship deck, is running Asha Greyjoy. It's running at 3x, and we'll get back to her. It's running Balon at 3x. It's running Euron at 3x. It's running Victarion at 3x. It's running Triss at 3x. All right, so that just means naturally, just from your draw, you have 3 saves for all of your key characters, right? And we can go back to Brandon here, who's running, 3 Ashas, 3 Balons, 3 Eurons, right, and 2 of the small Theon. It's running just all of these excellent characters in dupes. But you're also running additional neutral saves that don't require you to specifically have Asha or see a second copy of Asha, and that is in the form of course, Iron Mines, which saves any character, so you can save your non-unique characters with Iron Mines, which is super important. And of course, Risen from the Sea, which is even more obnoxious than Iron Mines to play against, because of course Iron Mines is on the board. All right, your opponent has 1 Iron Mines. That means they have a non-unique character, a duped character, and Iron Mines. You know that, okay, if Valor comes, or for military claim, I know they have, if Valor Margulis comes, I know, okay, they can save the unique character, and then they can save the non-unique character with the Iron Mines. Risen, because it comes from the hand, is very difficult to play around as your opponent. Now, sometimes if you played against Greyjoy a lot, you can kind of see when they are, playing as if they have a Risen by the Sea. or Risen from the Sea, not Risen by the Sea. That'd be a different card, but a cooler card. So Risen from the Sea, so you are running 6 neutral saves that can save any character in your deck, along with 3 or 2 saves, I guess, for all of your important unique characters. Super powerful, super duper powerful. And it allows you to do something here called aggressive valoring. Some factions, Martell can kind of aggressively valor, particularly in its older attrition ways, but Martell generally, they aggressively valored in the sense that they were okay with clearing your board, but they would also lose their board. But they knew that they had the resources in their hand to rebuild and do all those other kind of things. Tyrell can aggressively valor, particularly if Marjorie, the big Marjorie, the 6-cost Marjorie, is on the board and duped or has a bodyguard or a lady in waiting. You can valor, oh, I killed my Renly. Renly goes away. Mace comes out. Mace gets a power, blah, 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 blah. He starts running. Or Randall comes out and he starts doing a ton of challenges. But that's not, aggressively valoring isn't a strategy that those factions can do consistently. Like every game, that is not their game plan. For Greyjoy, it often is. Greyjoy, often you see Greyjoy players turn 2 or turn 3 valoring, and they can do this because of the redundancy of saves. Tyrell has a ton of saves. Tyrell is encouraged right now to run a lot of unique characters at 3x. Renly, Mace, Marjorie, just to name 3. But it doesn't have these supplemental saves in the form of Iron Mines and in the form of Risen. So it doesn't mean you just don't have to draw that second copy of Asha. You can also draw that Iron Mines. You can also draw that Risen from the Sea, allowing you to leverage your board state in a way that no other faction really can with Valar Morghulis. This is where why Greyjoy has been a perennial presence in the metagame since its inception, is its ability to leverage these saves, and why Greyjoy has in particular been one of the top half factions since the release of Valor, is because of this ability to aggressively valor consistently. And if you've ever played against Greyjoy, whether on Iron Throne or in person, you have seen a Greyjoy player aggressively valor you. Okay. So that's the save. So we've gone through the location control package. We've gone through a little bit of the no fun package, and let's talk a little bit about the mid-range package. And then I think I'll talk a little bit more about sort of how the no fun package interacts with the plots, and then we can sort of talk a little bit about how to beat Greyjoy and what sort of strategies beat Greyjoy. So the thing I hate most about Greyjoy is the sort of mid-range package it has. These 7 costers. It's the thing I personally don't like playing up against Greyjoy, as I said in the last Second Sons, because of this. So let's look at these characters. So, and it's running basically 4 of them. And that is Asha Greyjoy. She's got stealth, she's got pillage, and she has this very powerful tutor effect. Now, Asha might be one of the most hyped characters, and she's really powerful. She is not really she's not a closer in the way in which some of the other characters we're going to talk about, but she does provide a consistent card advantage engine to you, particularly in the late game. And of course, just 3 icons at 5 strength is really powerful, but she's not as over the curve as maybe we initially thought she was. Or maybe just Greyjoy right now isn't in a position to support her as much as she could be. But she is a really strong card. She's not the biggest threat in the deck, but particularly later in the game when you have 5, 6, 7, 8 plus cards in your discard pile, and Asha's searching through half of your opponent has 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plus cards in their discard pile, and you are searching half your deck, a third of your deck for any card you choose that you don't have to reveal. That's really powerful. And of course, the stealth on a high strength character is also really powerful. Now, so why Asha doesn't run away with games in the way in which her uncles and her father do, she's still a really powerful, efficient mid-range character with 3 icons. Super strong, super important card in this deck. The next one is Balon. All right, so this 6-cost Balon from the core set has largely fallen out of favor because of the sheer power of this Balon Greyjoy. The fact that now he's actually gone down a little bit in power because of his first piece of text, which means that he can do, when he's declared as a military attacker, he doesn't kneel unless your opponent controls a king. But there are more kings in the metagame thanks to Jakob's plot, thanks to the King in the North, which we'll get to in a second, which is in this deck. So there's more kings, so he's more often kneeling. But he also, there's usually a part of the game where you're getting 2 challenges with Renown from Balon, and he has this additional kneel a Greyjoy location to give each loyal character you control +1 strength. And of course, 3 of the 4 best characters in Greyjoy are loyal. This Balon, Asha, and Euron. So you can pump them over to cause them to win challenges, to protect them from burn, so that they don't get burned during the challenge. They'll die at the end of the challenge, but can get through that challenge, get through that Euron trigger so that he can steal something, or things like that. So this Balon is just another challenges-based machine, and he has the action economy because when his ability is turned on, he's able to participate in 2 challenges at the bare minimum. Super strong. And of course, we've already talked about Euron. I don't want to belate him, but I do want to point to his synergy with Asha, which is a little off-theme, but extremely powerful. The ways in which the pillage from Asha and the pillage from Euron synergize, because Asha's, as you put more cards in your discard pile, Asha's letting you tutor through your deck, and of course, as you put more cards in your opponent's discard pile, the better the locations you can steal. And then of course, our 3rd place finisher here, or 4th place finisher here, excuse me, because we barely talked about Euron, is Victarion Greyjoy. He's the non-loyal one, so he's more vulnerable to things like breaking ties, but he's still super powerful, largely because of that Intimidate. That Intimidate is very, very, very strong. Particularly if you can combine him with an Asha or a Balon in the challenges, he gives you Greyjoy a lot of spot challenge control, and Victarion can run away with games. He can just run away. Like an early Vic, all right, put it this way. Vic is usually very good at the beginning, and Asha is very good at the end, while Balon and Euron are good throughout the game. Because Victarion early on can just kneel your opponent's key characters, and that spot location control, or excuse me, not location control, challenge control, allows you to continue to snowball things, to get off that Euron trigger you need to steal their high tower, to kneel their intrigue icon, or their only power icon that they played on the first turn, so that you can get your We Do Not Sow off to discard their Dorn, and then later steal with Euron. So again, Victarion and his ability to run over challenges phases with this Intimidate, plus the Renown, is really strong. And while this card, another really strong card and this is in Brandon's deck, is of course the small Theon, the 3-cost Theon. While Theon is attacking alone, each character with higher strength than his does not contribute its strength to the challenge, is extremely strong in this current meta. He is, of course, Targ food and Venomous Blade food, but he's super strong against Tyrell, and Tyrell's ability to run big strength characters. It tends to have small, particularly early on, it tends to have smaller boards that, the Renleys, the Marjories, the Maces, they can't defend this challenge. That means they have to have their ambushy guys to defend your challenge, and all of their strength pumps become bad. So it's very easy, particularly in early Theon, to get unopposed challenges and win them to get off your We Do Not Sows. And then, of course, these are all good mid-range characters. They're about pushing challenges through. Greyjoy also recently got Silence's Crew, which is one of the best mid-range characters in the game. 4 for 4, awesome strength. And it gets +2 strength for each gold it has. It has Bestow, and it gets +2 strength for each gold it has. And then after a location card or attachment is discarded using Pillage, whether it's Silence's built-in Pillage or Euron's built-in Pillage or what have you, it allows you to place 1 gold on this, pumping its strength. So you can play it as a pretty efficient naked 4 for 4, and then just by your deck doing the things it wants to do, and of course Silence's Crew itself has Pillage, it just grows and grows and grows as strength and grows as a threat. Ridiculous. So Greyjoy has this mid-range package that is running to win challenges, control the challenges phase, and get its main tricks in the form of we do not so off. And then sort of the final thing we need to talk about here is this no fun package that they're running. So the first is Barring the Gates. Barring the Gates is extremely powerful against Tyrell. It's powerful against Targaryen. I've been recommending it over again. And it's still powerful against some Martell builds, some that are still running Flea Bottom, some that are still running some of the ambush characters. It's what gives it an ability to survive against like Martell Wolf and attrition decks, which we'll get to in a little bit. Very strong, part of that no fun. And it has 5 gold, which is just really good in this deck. It's running First Snow of Winter to clear the board out of the small characters you use in Claim Soak, and leaving, again, most of your deck that you care about is 5+ strength. I guess the lowest cost character that you care about would be Silence's Crew, 4 cost, survive First Snow of Winter. Everything else can return your hand for a while, and you just pound them with your big, beefy 7 and 6 cost characters. Not fun. And then the final no fun thing is, of course, King in the North, turning off your opponent's abilities on the board abilities in the form of their character abilities, attachment abilities, and location abilities. You, of course, run a native king in the form of Balon, but many Greyjoy Wars decks are currently running King of Salt and Rock, which of course gives the king trait to any Ironborn character, so you can have Asha with her own Queen's Moot, yay. Asha is my only favorite Greyjoy character, so I'm a little bit of an Asha fanboy. Anyway, so you can make Asha a king, you can make anybody a king, it doesn't even need to be a unique Ironborn character. Any character that can take attachments becomes a king. And then it also gives you a form of getting power from pillage, furthering your pillage theme, furthering your no fun theme, furthering your discard pile punishment theme. Whew. All right, so that's sort of how Greyjoy plays. That's his strategy. So how do we beat this? Well, the number one way you beat it is this card, Valudo Harris. As we said earlier, Greyjoy relies a lot on its huge characters. I mean, there's not, like, we've all seen these Greyjoy boards where it's like Silence's Crew, Euron, Asha, Balon, 2-drop. Valudo Harris punishes the hell out of that. It's super strong. The 5 initiative also helps you because you want to be able to control the initiative of the turn. It has solid gold, and the fact that your opponent has to go down. Again, Greyjoy wants, as a mid-range deck, Greyjoy wants to play big, efficient characters, and in particular right now, Greyjoy's oomph is really contained in its 7 cost and 6 cost slot. It needs Euron, it needs Balon, it needs Asha, it needs Vic to win, preferably 2 to 3 of them. And Valudo Harris says no. And of course, it gets around saves. So your opponent can have a tripped up Asha and a duped up Euron and an Iron Mines for its Victarion. And you know what? Those dupes aren't going to do anything there. You are going to be down to just 1 character in that case. And the number of times I've been playing Greyjoy characters, particularly on the Greyjoy players, particularly on the Iron Throne, I've reduced them down to 1 character thanks to Valudo Harris, and their greed is really high. Greyjoy is probably, besides Tyrell, the greediest faction. And it also is the faction that relies the most on it keeping more than one of its big characters. Because at the end of the day, like, if you're playing Tyrell and they Valudo Harris you and you've been greedy, you know which of the big dude or dudettes you need to keep. Like, all right, is this a Renly keep spot? Is this a Marjorie keep spot? Or is this a Mace keep spot? And it all depends on how close you are to winning, how much power is on each thing, do you need card draw, blah, blah, blah. You got to evaluate the board state. But you only really need to keep one of them to leverage it. And oftentimes it's actually Marjorie if you get aggressive, if you get Valudo Harris by your opponent, because Marjorie allows you to, of course, tutor up one of the other 2 lords that you had to throw under the desk. So Greyjoy, though, doesn't have that option. Greyjoy doesn't, because Greyjoy's only win condition is challenges, really. With stealing your stuff so they can win challenges with it. But is to win challenge. It doesn't have that passive power route that Tyrell can have in the form of Mace, in the form of Old Town. It gets hurt even more. It needs to keep that Euron on so it can keep the pressure on you, and it can just run you over. And Valar Dohaeris puts the brakes on that. Really strong. I would definitely recommend, if you're in a Greyjoy heavy meta, to be playing Valar Dohaeris. The next suggestion, the next plot, is Political Disaster. It's so let's go back. There's not a huge number of locations here. So why is Roy recommending that I run Valar Dohaeris? Or not Valar Dohaeris, excuse me, Political Disaster. I'm running because there's in the first player championship deck, there is just one copy of a unique location. In Brandon's deck from Harrenhal, it's running 0. And that's a huge problem against Political Disaster, particularly because it has locations that it wants to stick around that are non-unique, like Iron Mines. So, again, Greyjoy also relies on its big characters. 7, 7, 3, 3, or 7. It's just, let's look at this curve, right? Character curve. All right, pretty good here. It's running 51 cost cards. I wish this separated characters, but look at this. It's running 9 7 cost characters, 3 6 cost characters, right? And 7 4 cost cards, right? Or not characters, but we know that there's no 7 cost cards. But anyway, it's an expensive deck. We've got 1, 2, 3, 3 7 drops, a 6 drop, a 5 drop, and a good 4 drop. All that's expensive, right? And this deck's the first player championship deck's only running Time of Plenty and Trade Routes, and the interaction between Political Disaster and Trade Routes is not favorable for the Trade Routes player. And the same is true for Brandon's deck, which is running just Time of Plenty and supporting the Faith, I guess, as big gold plots. You know, You Win or You Die is kind of a big gold plot at 5. But anyway, the point is this. Greyjoy requires an economy base, and Political Disaster blows it up because it's not relying on unique economy. It's relying on things like Great Halls and the Greyjoy Reducer, all of which blow up. And you can force your opponent to choose between their Iron Mines and their economy, which makes their aggressive valors much worse and your defensive valors much better, because they'll have to burn the saves, and then they won't have burn the saves in the valor, and then they won't have any locations in play, and you can out-tempo them if you have a decent hand, because they won't be able to play anything. Or they get rid of their saves, they can no longer aggressively valor, and you can valor them, and their board is wiped out, and you guys are back at parity. So really strong against Greyjoy, simply because of their reliance on non-unique locations, and the ability to force them to choose between their economy and their saves, or force them to not choose and have like one save, one piece of economy, and then in many ways they're screwed as well. So they really offers them no good choices. So Valar Dohaeris is your number 1 choice. Political Disaster is number 2 to sort of kick Greyjoy around. The third would be Milk of the Poppy. Milk of the Poppy is coming back in the meta to deal with Mace. It should be back in the meta, of course, to deal with Greyjoy. Greyjoy. So Greyjoy, all these good Greyjoy characters. Let's go back to them. Asha, Balon, Euron, Victarion. They all are awesome. They do awesome things. They're great. They suck when you put a Milk of the Poppy on them. They become beat sticks, but that's it. And in the current meta in particular, those beat sticks aren't going to get you where you want to do. What allows Greyjoy to keep up with Tyrell, what allows Greyjoy to keep up with Martell, is the ability to have those beat sticks, but they're beat sticks with a bite. But when you just turn Euron into a 7 cost, 6 strength Tricon, that's great, but it's not going to let you stand up to a Doran's game. It's not going to let you stand up to a Mace. In the way in which Euron, with his ability, can stand up to Mace, because he can steal your opponent's high tower, he can steal your opponent's old town, he can really just gum up the Tyrell player's game plan. Same with against Martell. Okay, so that's really, 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 really strong. So Mocha the Poppy should be in your deck to deal with Tyrell. Again, excuse me. And it should be in there to deal with... I hadn't even selected Arya that I wanted to deal with Greyjoy as well. Anyway, the other character that you want to look at, or the other card you want to look at, is Arya Stark. And that's going to bring us into the deck that can beat Greyjoy consistently. Arya Stark, while Arya Stark is standing, characters cannot be saved. This is like the anti-Greyjoy card. It makes Greyjoy players cry. Because they can stack up dupes and iron mines all they want on their characters, but Arya says, F that. F that. Yeah. I mean, there's really nothing more to explain with Arya. The fact that saves are in many ways, alongside Euron, the other heart of what keeps Greyjoy going, keeps Greyjoy in the meta. Arya says that that whole leg of your strategy is useless, is bad news for Greyjoy. Greyjoy hates seeing an Arya Stark played against them, and this is sort of my final suggestion for how to beat Greyjoy. And that brings us to, of course, the Banner of the Wolf. House Martell Banner of the Wolf. This deck, which is the second place Cleveland Regional deck, is a good answer. So why is it a good answer to Greyjoy? So, one, it makes it hard for Greyjoy to win challenges. It has Arya Hota. It has Shadow City Bastard, which is a little less effective against Greyjoy because most of the stuff is bigger. It has Dornish Spies, which take their icons. It has the Arya Stark to defeat them, their save strategy, and then it has ways to control their locations, the form of Frozen Solid and Venom Frozen Solid. It can steal their lower cost characters in the form of Ward, and it has Venomous Blade to kill their low cost Theon and things like that. It has Harrenhal to force them to burn saves early. It has Hand's Judgments for their Risens. It has Vengeance for Elia. Vengeance for Elia is really annoying for Greyjoy players, particularly on a military challenge, because it forces them to you burn saves earlier, so they're setting up to aggressively valor you. They do a military challenge to eat away at some of your dupes or put power on their characters. You vengeance them, that requires them to either kill a character that they weren't expecting or to burn through saves, which then makes them more vulnerable to your valor or makes them more vulnerable to their own aggressive valor. And of course, Nymeria Sand is also good for location control. Ramsay Snow is super strong about against Greyjoy, because Greyjoy, again, is often reliant on those high cost characters, maybe supported by a couple Claim Soak or a couple of like lower tier mid-range characters like those Silence's Crews. Ramsay helps you chew through those things, which sets you up for March to the Wall. So they could have Silence's Crew, Euron, Asha. You Ramsay them, they have to get rid of the Silence's Crew. You march them, they have to get rid of Asha, they have to get rid of Euron. And of course, there's the powerful interaction with Arianne Martell and Ramsay, being able to play Arianne, wait for your opponent to marshal someone important, pop Arianne back into your hand, put Ramsay into play. Their character is gone. Ramsay is one of their characters has to be gone. Ramsay's also really strong on Valor turns. Greyjoy aggressively Valors. You can play Euron and then not Euron, excuse me. You can play Ramsay and often hit something like Euron. And of course, March to the Wall is very good against Greyjoy, because again, if you can limit them down to those just 1 or 2 7-cost characters, they're going to lose because you're going to march away their characters. Now, attrition in general, Night's Watch Wolf is also really good against Greyjoy, because Greyjoy, while it has saves, it doesn't like the kind of pressure on its economy that attrition decks can put on it. It doesn't like that it's going to force you to be sacrificing all these characters all the time that get around its saves, particularly its non-unique saves in the form of Iron Mines and in the form of Risens. They can't save from March. They can't save from Ramsey. And they don't like their oh my god, what's the save? Risen's getting canceled by Hand's Judgment. They just do not like this in this strategy in general. Greyjoy tends to fold to these kind of attrition strategies. Now, of course, Greyjoy can come over them with it can just kind of run away with games, but this version is running maybe one card. Well, obviously Flea Bottom, but it's running Harrenhal, which is a big fear to be stolen by Euron. But hopefully Harrenhal will give you an out. It will force you to burn their saves. So if you're really scared about Greyjoy, I would suggest playing House Martell, playing Martell Wolf. It's pretty consistently good against Greyjoy. All right, so I hope you all found this video informative. I hope you found my sort of insights about Greyjoy useful. So if you are afraid of Greyjoy, play Milks, play Political Disaster, play oh my god, Political Disaster. Oh, play Valar Dohaeris, play Arya Stark, particularly in an attrition deck like Night's Watch Wolf or Martell Wolf. And finally, if you feel like location-based decks are a huge problem in your meta, if you're afraid of location-based strategies, Greyjoy is the faction to play. All right, so that's sort of the ins and outs of Greyjoy. I hope, again, you found it informative. Please leave comments down below. I will probably the next video that I'm going to do will be about Wars to Come. I think sort of talking about why Wars to Come is omnipresent and sort of like how to build a plot deck. So it will be kind of a mixture of sort of overarching meta discussion, but also a new player-friendly video and talking about plot decks and how they work. So that's sort of what I'm targeting to do in my next episode of this. If you have another suggestion, please, again, leave it in the comments here. And otherwise, take care, and I'll see everybody next time.